Can you all hear me? Is this okay? No? Can you hear me now? How about it? Good evening. I'm Rhonda Kowalski. I am the Chair of Law and Legacy. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out this evening. Also, I'd like to thank Stacey Ayers and Crystal Hauser, who are with American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They have the table and the memorial quilt out by the front door. Our intention with Behind the Mask is to break down walls between us and them. While the topics will vary, our intent remains to hear the stories behind the masks that we all wear and to see each other from a new perspective. Tonight we kick off our series with Justin Lee, Dryden grad with Behind the Mask of Mental Illness. Justin.
All right, thanks everybody for showing up tonight. Hopefully some more people will head in as I do my presentation here. As you guys know, I'm Justin Lee. I graduated from Dryden in 2000. In 2003, I entered active duty Air Force, and first duty station was in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I worked on intercontinental ballistic missiles. In the end of 2004, actually got there in September of 2004. I was deployed to Kuwait for 5 months, and then I stayed in Cheyenne for eight years and went to Hill Air Force Base, where I met my wife Kim over here at the table. She is also a veteran, combat vet of Operation Iraqi Freedom. She spent 1 year outside the line, or outside the wires, doing combat patrols. So the reason we're here, Behind the Mask, it's very fitting, because when you're talking about mental illness, that's how we see it. The population may see one thing, but deep down there's a lot of other things that may be going on in a person's life. So many of you knew me through high school. Many of you knew my dad, Keith. In 2005, right after I had gotten back from my deployment, 4 months after I had gotten back from my deployment, I lost him to suicide. Our entire family lost him to suicide. His depression was very severe. He got to a point of where he was worried about losing his job. He was worried how he was going to support the family, how people were going to look at him. And mental illness has a negative stigma against it in the first place. When people, you hear, oh, that person's crazy, or this person's going off the deep end, this and that. And that negative stigma needs to end. In all reality, 1 in 5 of us are going to suffer from a mental illness in our lifetime. And that's a huge population. The suicide rates every year are growing drastically. I think last I checked, it was 43,000 people a year die by suicide. And if you notice, I use the words die by suicide. The reason I use that is all too often you hear the words, people say, well, he committed suicide. Well, when you hear the word committed, what is the first thing that you normally associate that with? It committed a crime. Suicide is not a crime. It is very much a sickness. It's like a cancer. It's like a broken leg. It's like any other type of sickness or illness that you can get. Your brain, no doubt, can get sick and affect you in so many different ways. So when I got back from Kuwait, I had regular contact with my dad all the time. My dad and I were pretty much like best friends. My dad was my hero, still is to this day. And after talking to him for a few months, because he had blown out his knee playing basketball, I noticed something was definitely different with him. He had, talking to him on the phone, his concentration was gone. He was all over the place. Most of the time, when we talked, he would cut it short. And so I told him one day to put my mom on the phone. And as soon as I asked, is Dad okay, she started crying. She broke down. So I told her, I said, I'll be there as fast as I possibly can. So I packed everybody up, and we drove 27 straight hours to New York. When I got there, my dad, as many as you guys know, was a very happy person, liked to joke all the time. And when I walked in the door, I wasn't even sure who I was looking at. He had gone from 220 pounds to 180 pounds. He had shaved off his mustache that I always knew he had. He always had a mustache when I was growing up. And just talking to him, he was completely different. We stayed there for a week. Most of the time he spent up in his room, away from us, which was very different, especially considering we had our 4-month-old, his 4-month-old granddaughter with us that he had never seen before. He actually, I can only recall that he held her one time, and that definitely was not like my dad. My sister Danielle, her son Brandon, when Brandon was around, my dad was on cloud 9. You wouldn't see him stop smiling. He would pace around the house. It even got to a point of, it was just him and I in the house, and I asked him, I said, Dad, what's going on? Are you okay? And he broke down and started crying. It's like, you don't expect to see your parent or, your father or your hero cry. And he said, Justin, I don't know what to do. And at that point in time, not really knowing all too much about mental illness, all I could say is, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right. Well, needless to say, I'd get back to Cheyenne to work. And I was going through team training at the time. And every couple mornings, we had to go to PT. And on June 1st, the day that my dad took his own life, I thought about calling him early in the morning because, I figured he wasn't sleeping well at all. So I was like, well, maybe if he did happen to fall asleep, I'm gonna let him sleep, and I'll call him after PT. I went home afterwards, took a shower, got ready for work, got up there, and I called the house. And Mom answered the phone, and she was crying. And I knew something was very wrong. She kept on asking me if there was people around me, if there were people there with me. And I kept saying, yes, there are people here with me. What is going on? And that's when she told me that my dad had taken his own life. And she dropped the phone, and our friend Sue got on the phone, and she confirmed it. Possibly the worst day of my life, no doubt. So I went home after trying to figure out how the heck I was going to get back to New York, and not many people. I don't even know how many people I've told this, but I actually went home and I was there by myself for a few minutes, and that was the first time I myself was actually suicidal. I had no clue how I was going to go through life without my dad. My dad was my best friend. Growing up, I had a severe separation anxiety from my dad. So that day, I closed myself in a room, and I thought about how I needed to be with my dad. He must have been watching over me that day, because the feeling went away pretty quick. And then I got home, and first person to meet me was my buddy Tim at the airport. He picked me up and got to the house, and my sister ran out. My sister Michelle ran out, and she came up and hugged me, crying, saying, "What are we going to do?" All I could think about that week, and I don't remember much, was how he could leave us. How he got to a point where he didn't feel we needed him anymore. And slowly that started just completely tearing me apart. A lot of that week I sat at the stairs of the basement where he had taken his own life, and just stared there and just asked myself why and what I could do different, and what did I do wrong. And that eventually led me into a very, very bad place. I began with major anger problems. I would snap at absolutely anything. But nobody ever really knew how bad it was until a couple years ago. So in January of 2013, I was home alone. I had just gotten back I had my daughters for Thanksgiving, and then I had flown home for Christmas to surprise my mom. And then I went home back to Utah, and I was by myself. I had nobody again. I felt extremely lonely. Months prior to that, I had started, I worked out at the Utah Test and Training Range, where I would be out there Monday through Thursday, and then I would come home Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the only time that I would leave the house was to go to the gym. The rest of the time I sat in my house with the blinds drawn, and there was even times where I was just sitting there on the couch looking at the TV, but the TV wasn't on. So on January, I believe it was January 13th, I went to bed early, woke up about midnight, 1 o'clock, and I just completely snapped. I don't know what it was, whether it was me feeling like I didn't have anybody anymore, or what it was, but I just woke up and I said, you know what, this isn't worth it anymore. I got out of bed, I went into my bathroom with a firearm, and I sat in the bathtub for hours. Luckily, I have good friends and family who got a hold of one another and got me on the phone and kept me busy until I could get to the hospital. I spent 4 days in the hospital, and basically during that time it was, here's some medication, sleep it off, and we're going to send you home. So still not knowing a whole lot about mental health other than the fact that my dad had major mental health or a major mental illness. I thought I was going to be fine. Like, I just have a chemical imbalance. I'm going to take these pills, and I'm going to be happy again. I'm going to be the same old Justin that I was years ago, and life is going to be good. Well, that wasn't the case. During that time, I was mandated to go to a mental health provider on base, and I would just go in there and tell them what they wanted to hear, and I would leave. How's your medications doing? It's doing great. They're working good. And then I would still suffer the same way that I was before. When Kim and I got together, things got better for a while. And then she noticed that I was again starting to go downhill. I was again very angry. I would flip out, and I would literally sit there in a rage. I would punch through doors. I would, if you guys know the Incredible Hulk, I would be so tense the whole time. I would just do that for hours and hours and hours. And I got to a point where I just said, you know what, forget it, this is my life. This is the way I'm going to live for the rest of my life. And I lost all hope. I had absolutely no hope in anything. I didn't have hope in the fact that I have a loving wife. I didn't have hope in the fact that I have a mom and sisters who care. I didn't have hope in the fact that I have aunts and uncles that care. I couldn't see it. And at that point, I finally understood how my dad was feeling. You sit there and you know, just like, why? Why would somebody take their own life? It literally ripped apart our family for many, many years. But I understood at that moment, because it wasn't about ending your life. My dad didn't want to die. I didn't want to die. But I wanted the pain to end. I didn't want to live through the mental anguish that I was feeling every minute of every day. Even when I went to sleep. Couldn't escape it. You couldn't escape it in any way, shape, or form. And so it kind of made the situation with my dad's suicide a little bit easier for me, except for one fact, is I blamed myself for his death. I blamed myself because I didn't ask enough questions. I blamed myself because I left that week when I saw how bad his illness was. The last time I talked to him, I got mad at him because he kept on handing the phone back to my mom because he couldn't concentrate in any way. So with that blame came even more rage toward myself, self-hatred. I would look at myself in the mirror and couldn't stand the person that I was staring at. For about 6 months before I went to the hospital for the second time, I was literally suicidal every single day. And I look back now and I can't even believe what I put Kim through. I can't believe what I put my mom and my sister through, because I know there was constant worry. But just like going back, I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about, how do I end this pain? how do I stop how do I stop myself from hurting my family? And that's what was going through my mind, even though that wasn't the case. Mental illness will play some horrible games with your head. It will drive you to think thoughts that are completely irrational, completely untrue. I got to a point of where I thought I was hearing voices. I couldn't tell if I was hearing voices or if it was just my brain overloading, telling myself to do crazy stuff. So finally, I had gotten to that point, and Kim opened my eyes when she said, I was terrified to go to the hospital again because I didn't want to lose my career in the Air Force. And on the day that she told me, she's like, Justin, you're going to die. If you do not go get help, you will die. And she's like, and then guess what? You're not going to have your Air Force career either way. So I went and checked myself into the ER, and I was just thinking that they were going to send me up to the mental health floor again, pump me full of a bunch of medication, and send me on my way. But instead, this time, they sent me to a hospital down in Salt Lake City called Salt Lake Behavioral Health. And in that hospital, they had a trauma unit for military members suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and other mental health problems. I spent 32 days in that program, and I walked out of there a different man, a better man, but not the best man that I could possibly be. They reevaluated all my medications. We had to do ungodly amounts of therapy. We had to tell stories that we weren't very comfortable telling to strangers. But I was able to make good friends in there, and it was definitely one of the best options for me at the time. When I got out, I went to my mental health provider at Hill Air Force Base, and he told me that basically my Air Force career was over because of my mental health. He said, you were going to be medically, or we're going to med board you, which will result in medical retirement. And of course, that didn't go over very well. Prior to me going into the Air Force, prior to me going into the hospital in Salt Lake Behavioral Health, I found out bad news that really sent me spiraling. Hey, if you guys are going to be rude, please leave. This is a very serious topic. So you either stop or you leave. Please. So I was told, because of my mental health, that I could not remain in my career field. They told me that my time as a nuclear missile maintenance maintainer was done, and that I was going to have to cross-train into an admin job. My career field is very small. It was 500 people in the entire Air Force that did my job, and they all were like my brothers. So you can only imagine having that taken away from you. And that was another reason that I became very suicidal and I had to go to the hospital. I am doing better to this day, but not doing great. I still suffer sometimes from I have very bad separation anxiety from my wife. I have issues for the fact that when I grew up, my biological mom left, and then the one person in the world that I knew would never leave left me. So in my brain, it's been rewired to think that anybody that I get close to is going to leave me. Anybody. And there's no pills for that. There's absolutely no pills for that. I had issues seeing my kids because of mental health, because of my mental health. The courts in South Carolina decided that it was okay to keep my kids from me during this situation, simply because I had a mental illness. Simply because I reached out for help and did what I was supposed to do so I could live. But yet I was still punished. So, needless to say, that obviously affected my mental health as well. And obviously every day I worry that my daughters are going to fall into the same issues that I have. So it's very important to watch your children. I mean, if you think the stats, 1 in 5 of us suffer from mental illness. Obviously, a lot of it is genetic, and it will be passed on to your kids. So it's very important to watch your little ones for these issues. We finally got through everything with the custody. Not everything was fair. But imagine doing something that is right to save your life and you being punished for it. It's the way society looks at mental illness today. Everything about it's negative. And that's why Kim and I do what we do. We run a 501c3 nonprofit for military veterans and first responders, mental health awareness, and suicide prevention. With our nonprofit, we have a 24-hour crisis line. We keep a phone with us at all times, just in case someone goes into crisis. We do peer support groups. We have, if somebody needs more than just a peer support group, we also support them by paying for their counseling bills and so on. Simply because of my dad's suicide, one of the most troubling facts is my sisters have, my youngest sister has a 3% chance higher than anybody else of dying by suicide, simply because our dad died by suicide. Myself and my older sister, because we are veterans, have almost a 25% chance higher of dying by suicide than anybody else in this room. It's a pretty scary fact. Every day, 20 veterans are dying by suicide. And I believe it's 1 police officer a day, right? 1 police officer a day is taking his own life too. So how do we help the process? How do we make this better? the most important thing that I look back and is we have to be true to ourselves. Nobody else could have made me get help except for myself. If my dad had chosen to go get the help that he needed, he probably would still be with us here today. Nobody else can save you but you. Your mental health runs your life. Your body can withstand a ton of things. Do more than you could ever imagine. But you're going to get to a point where you're going to say, you know what, I can't do this. That's not your body giving up on you, it's your brain. I watched this new show called The Selection on TV. It's a bunch of civilians that go and do special operations training. And we're in day 6. There's 30 people, 5 are left. Not because they just couldn't do it anymore. Not because their bodies actually broke and gave up on them. It's because their brains said, I can't do this anymore, I give up. And that's the exact same thing that happens during mental illness. I am, and have been, terrified of public speaking. Scares the crap out of me. Very fearful of it. But guess what? I'm up here talking to you guys, talking to Facebook, and I didn't die. I made myself do it. I make myself do this. A couple days ago, I was thinking, I was like, man, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I don't know. I just don't think I can do it. So, kind of went and was by myself. Kim was at work and said, okay, what are the disadvantages of doing this? What are the advantages of doing this? And the advantages outweigh the disadvantages by a lot. Because I don't do this for myself. In a small way I do, because it does help me heal to talk about the stuff that I've been through and the ideas that have come through my head of ending my own life. But I do it for the people that need to hear the stories, the people that need to know that this stuff is real. You can't just tell someone to suck it up or get over it or it'll pass in time. Because 10 years later, guess what? I still blamed myself. I still hated myself. I still did not want to live. Simply because I had so much regret on not trying to do more for my dad. We have to, as a society, sit down and help these people. You know, if people are acting irrational or not themselves, you can't be like, oh man, what's wrong with that guy? No, well, he'll get over it. Well, if you go and you talk to that person that may be acting completely unlike themselves, you may save their life. But if you let it go, you never know when that person's just going to say, you know what, this isn't worth it anymore. And that's the life I lived. Because there was no way that I thought my dad would end his own life. There's no way. He always told me growing up, Justin, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Because he used to see it all the time working at the college campus. And then for him to take his own life, I just didn't understand it. Who knows? Maybe if we had asked more questions, maybe we don't know. I've gotten past the point where I blame myself because you just don't know. You can't change what you don't know. It got to a point where I feared living. I feared everything. To this day, I still fear stuff. But I listen to a lot of motivational speakers, and it's one thing that this guy Les Miles said, fear is not real. It's all perceived in our mind. I sat back and I was thinking about it, and I guess that I can see where he's right. I mean, people are terrified of heights. When was the last time that they fell out of an airplane or fell off a mountain or something like that? Like I said earlier, people are terrified to do what I'm doing right now. But you're not going to get up here, put a microphone under your mouth and die. The fears that we have in our head need to be re-examined. And I challenge everybody in here to write down some of your fears. And actually take a look at those fears and see if it will actually hurt you. I guarantee it won't, unless it actually puts you in danger. Because then the danger is very real. Another thing that I've seen on the motivational speaking is you have to find your why. Why do you wake up every morning? Why do you do what you love? Why do you not do what you love? Why? I figured out my why. And the reason I get up in the morning and don't think about taking my own life anymore is because of my wife. It's because of my mom. It's because of my sisters. It's because of my aunts and uncles. Because I finally realized that they need me in their lives. And I think if my dad had done the same thing, again, he would still be here with us. Because I know what his whys were. He loved his family. Absolutely loved them. Loved every single one of us. One of the hardest working men I've ever seen in my life. But still able to take part in every basketball game, every football game, every swim meet of my sisters. I mean, you have to find your why. If you get to a point of where you just say that, this may not be worth it anymore. And all of us in Dryden have seen tragedy, every single one of us. Every single one of us has seen tragedy. And everybody asks, why me? Why this person? Why that person? We have to find our why in order to push forward during those times. It's hard. It's very hard. Because at times you think, well, it's for the better. I'm just hurting these people. I'm not bringing anything to their lives. I'm just hurting them. And that's when you get into that point where you just don't care anymore. And I'll tell you what, it's kind of a scary place when you get to a point where you're not scared to death. But a lot of people get there. And a lot of people fight through it. But a lot of people are unable to make it through it. Oh. good thing about the tough times, mental illness and everything is I've learned a lot about myself. You look back and you kind of wonder, you're like, man, how did I even make it through this situation? How did I even make it through that situation? How am I still here? But those are the times that it makes you the stronger person that you are. And that's what you have to survive, is the mental health or the mental strength to get through anything. Loss of a loved one, accidents, you name it. You have to have that strength. I'm not talking going to the gym and lifting weights and doing crazy stuff like that. It's preparing yourself mentally and breaking stuff down to a point of where you may actually understand what the entire situation is about. So many of us are quick to jump at, bad things, and of course, I blame social media for a lot of the mental health problems. Reality, Facebook, you get on there, it's negative this and negative that, and I hate this person, and this person sucks, and people bashing each other, and doing all these bad things. When I was a kid, we didn't have any of that. It's I blame social media a lot for all that. Nothing but negativity. Like in all reality, when you open up your Facebook page, how many positive things do you see? And then how many negative things do you see? Of course our society is going to have mental illnesses and mental health problems. If you live in a world where everything's negative, your mind, your thoughts are going to be nothing but negative. And it doesn't just hurt you, it hurts everybody around you. And when you become such a negative person, it will destroy certain aspects of your life that drive to mental illness. So I really don't have much more. I don't know how long I've been going. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for me? I'm not scared to answer anything either. You guys can be as personal as you want. Yeah.
How did it feel? Well, you explained a lot, but did you want to do suicide when your dad died?
Yeah. After my dad died, that was the very first time I was like, well, if my dad did it, I'll do it. I'm not going to be separated from him, so might as well do it too. But then, obviously, he must have been watching over me because I didn't do it. Really, at that time, the only thing that really saved me was the fact that I had a 4-month-old daughter. Anybody else have any questions? Yes.
So I'm curious, in hindsight, are you able to look back now to sort of see where things started for you? Like,
Yeah.
how do you identify for yourself or for your family and friends that, before it gets so bad that maybe there's no return? Are you able to sort of
Yes.
down that?
It was crazy because when I checked myself into Salt Lake Behavioral Health, I went in there and obviously you don't want to tell all your personal stuff to strangers, and so I was kind of closed down, and they're so used to that they made you talk. So one of my counselors was like, or my therapist was like, hey, okay, so where did your trauma start? And I was like, I don't know, maybe when my dad died by suicide. And she started asking me about my childhood and stuff. I was like, I had a great childhood. Things were good. And then she's like, so your parents weren't divorced or anything like that? I was like, oh yeah, my parents were divorced. And biological mom left me when I was 7, 8 years old. She goes, there we go. That's where we start. So it was very interesting to sit there and you know, you think your trauma starts a couple years from to the point of where you're, I just don't want to live. And in all reality, it started when I was much, much, much younger. And going through that, it kind of helped me process a little more about, you know, anger issues and stuff like that. And but getting to that point of where everything falls down around you, where all the stuff that's been piling up for years and years and years and years and years finally comes down. There's not a whole lot that can really, like for me, I have to, my wife has to, you know, be there with me. Otherwise, you know what, you know, even if I'm the biggest asshole to her, you know, and she doesn't want to deal with me, and I'm triggered, and I'm at that point of where I'm like, you know, just screw it. I need her. So if you get to a point of where, you know, you see someone and their world just came down crashing around them, the most important thing is just be there. You have to just be there. And another problem with that, with our society today, and mental illness and people getting to the point where they're in crisis and they don't care if they end their own life, is we just want to talk. When we get to the point of where we've crossed over that line, we just want you to hear us. I don't want you to answer me, and that's the issue. Too many of us, you know, people go into crisis and go, oh, well, you know, let me fix you, let me do this, let me do that, you know, let me tell you some stuff that you want to hear, just so I can make you feel good. It's important. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that I'm going to be fine. I don't want to hear that everything's going to be okay. I don't want to hear that, oh, well, you got a doctor's appointment next week, so we'll figure it out then. I want you to listen to what I have to say and just sit there and listen to what I have to say. I don't need a response. So that's one of the most important things when people get to that point, is just being there and listening. And not necessarily responding, unless they want you to respond.
Justin,
Yes.
how scary is it when you take that first step, entering the behavioral? What is that process, and how do you, what were your emotions, so it can help somebody to know it's not as scary as they think it is? Did you feel relief walking in there?
So the first time that I went into the hospital and I finally said, yeah, whatever, I'll go get help. As I was walking through the emergency doors, I said, well, my career's done. It's over. But once I got in there, and I mean, when you go into an emergency room and you tell them that you're suicidal, they strip you of everything. They take your clothes, they take your shoes, socks, everything. And I was like, man, this was not worth walking through the door. This is not worth it, man. These people are treating me like criminals. But that was my thought. But in all reality, they were just there to help. They were there to save me, so I didn't do something stupid with the stuff that I had on, you know. And laying there in bed and actually walking into the mental health unit, it's scary. It's very scary. But after, when I went into Salt Lake Behavioral Health, I got there early in the morning, very early in the morning, so when I got there, I just went to bed. And when I got up, all the other military guys that were in there with me, greeted me with open arms. Hey man, you know, what's your name? What do you do? This and that. Everyone was super nice. All the people were nice, all the nurses, all the doctors, everything. And it was well worth it. It's a very, very scary thing to do, to finally say, you know what, I do need help. I've gotten to a point of where if I don't get help, I'm not going to live, and I have to do this. And so it's very scary, but that fear, like I talked about earlier, goes away very, very quick. And it's very, very much worth it. Very much worth it. Yes, ma'am.
At any point during any of this, did you ever become violent, whether with yourself or with others around you?
Yes.
Whether it's cutting and hitting and then just throwing things?
Yes. Between my townhouse that we were living in and the house that we live in now, and I've gone through about 4 doors. And I have cut myself. I have scars all up and down my forearm here from cutting myself. And unfortunately, one time I did do it right in front of Kim. And she's like, "Why are you doing that? Why? Why are you cutting yourself?" I said, "Because I can't feel anything. I want to feel something, even if it's pain. I want to feel something because I can't feel anything." And then, as far as the violent outbursts, mine last for several hours. And it used to be to where I was doing this thing called neurofeedback. It's where basically they do some frequency stuff off of your head. You watch a movie. It's pretty complicated. I don't even know how to really explain it. But they were at the wrong frequency. And so every Wednesday night I would break into a violent outbreak. I would scream for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, until the point of where, and I was so tensed up that I would wake up the next morning and feel like I got hit by a truck, and my body was, I couldn't do anything, and I had no voice. So, and they contribute that a lot to, they're saying that it probably has a lot to do with a lot of the concussions that I've sustained throughout my life from playing football. So I said I played football here, and I had a few concussions, and I played semi-pro football for years, and I took some pretty violent hits doing that. So our concern is maybe, I'm sure everybody in here has seen the stuff about CTE. A lot of professional football players are getting it. And I'm actually on the waiting list for UCLA is doing a research study on it, just trying to get everything approved through the FDA. So that may be where a lot of my violent outbreaks are coming from. But yes, they're very real. They're very scary. I know when they're coming. I know when I've gotten to that point of where the light switch is going on. I can sit there and tell myself, "Stop, knock it off," but I can't. I just can't stop the yelling. And I've gotten to the point where I tell Kim to leave because I don't want to do anything stupid to hurt her. So yes, those are very real. Danielle.
With your Project Unbreakable, as all 3 of us being veterans and knowing the mental health stigma that they have in the military, do you have any plans of trying to get in with the VA system or the military bases mental health system to try to help?
So we haven't reached out to the VA at all, but the Air Force just got a new Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force. When I saw that he was being brought in, Kim and I had already written a letter to Chief Cody, the previous chief, and we sent it off to him, and he didn't respond. And we sent it to Chief Wright, and he responded the next day. And so we're hoping that, because he said that he was going to look into it because there was issues with the whole personal reliability program. You know, them telling me I couldn't be a missile maintainer anymore because I sought help. And he said that he would address it when he gets settled in and everything. So we're hoping we will hear back from him, and we'll be able to at least work with the Air Force. And Salt Lake Behavioral Health actually has their chief operating officer. We're partnering with them now with a nonprofit, and he knows a guy who runs a program that goes around. He has professional football players go around and do motivational speaking at all the bases. And so this month, that guy's supposed to be in Salt Lake, and he's gonna tell me when he's coming, and we're gonna meet up. So hopefully I can go do that. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Jason, are you on any long-term therapy or medications to help control those bodies and what have you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm on a ton of medications, a lot, and a lot of them I'm at the max dosage. When I went into Salt Lake Behavioral Health, they took me off every single medication that I was on, and then started me on a new regimen just so they could watch me. And it worked for a little bit. I mean, the medications work, but they put me at a place where I'm sitting just above the line. I'm okay, but if I forget to take my medication one day, I fall into either a depression or I go into a rage. I do see a Christian counselor once a week. That's another thing that's very important with mental illness, and I'm just going to touch on it because I'm not going to push religion or anything on anybody, but it's very important to have faith in something in order to get through the tough times. And so that helps me a little bit. And then I do the neurofeedback, which is the hooking up the electrodes to my brain and trying to fix it through radio frequency or however they do it. It's going to be a long-term thing. I know for a fact that I have chemical imbalances. It's not just, hey, you're depressed because this happened, because your Notre Dame football team sucked this year, or, you know, whatever. But yeah, it's going to be a long-term thing. I'm constantly going to be on medication, and I'm working on right now getting hooked up with another psychiatrist so they can reevaluate my medications and hopefully get me to a little bit better place than I am right now. I'll tell you what, we did yoga at Salt Lake Behavioral Health. It was mandated 3 times a week, and it was amazing how much that really helped.
And also another comment I had is you said your dad made a different choice. I don't think your father was in a good place to make any choices, really. I don't know, I guess I'm not understanding.
So,
What do you do for someone that's...
so I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't know. And so I just go off of what my family has told me. My dad was obviously in a very bad place, but when he would go to the doctors, all of a sudden he would perk up, he would put that mask on, and he would say that everything was fine. And with me saying that is, if he had, you know, said, you know what, I do need help, instead of telling the doctor that he was fine. That's, because I mean, my mom, my uncles, you know, were telling the doctor, no, he's not fine, you know, but because my dad didn't say that anything was wrong, the doctor couldn't do anything. And so, yeah, I'm just saying it in the fact that, I mean, I got to that place. The only difference is I didn't go through with it. And I went and I reached out for help. So I think if he had, and I understand, you know, military, law enforcement, firefighters, all that, we have this, oh, well, you know, he carries a gun, he can't have a mental illness. If he has a mental illness, if he's depressed or has anxiety or anything like that, we have to take his gun, we got to put him behind a desk or anything like that. So I understood my dad's fears of losing his job and him thinking he was going to lose his job and stuff like that. Because, you know, everybody looks at the military and first responders as unbreakable. Hence our Project Unbreakable. And that's part of the problem. You know, we have this stigma that we can't be broke and that we're so strong, but if we do, then we're no longer reliable. And for us to not be able to go through with our duties, you might as well take away our life, you know. To be in the situation of the military or you know, a public defender or something like that. People do that because they love what they do, not because it's something that they have to do. And to take all that away from you because you have depression and you know, that's why we have the high suicide rates. People are terrified. People are absolutely terrified that if they self-identify that they're going to lose everything, but they don't look the other direction. And my wife had to, you know, well, if you're dead, you're not going to have that job anyway. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but Uncle Scott.
Yeah, just on the topic of like perseverance, because we've heard a lot about the things that are going to be challenging you've had to wrestle with. The reality is, in a very positive way, you've had a lot of successes through your career, at the professional level, in the military, you've gotten yourself a bachelor's degree, you've launched Project Unbreakable with Kim. What role has that played in because it's obviously some high functioning stuff you continue to be able to do. Does that help find a place of balance for you when you're moving forward on these missions which aren't very significant?
Yeah, for certain hours in the day, I guess you could say. Like now that I'm medically retired, you know, obviously, I still haven't found a job, and Unbreakable has been what I've been doing. And when I'm doing that, I feel a definite sense of purpose and accomplishment and how far that we are going. I mean, because like you said, in the past year, we've made some pretty good leaps and pretty good partnerships. And then I don't know. I can't really explain it because like when I was running the field and when I was in the military, like people considered me to be the best of the best of missile maintainers. But some mild supervisors used to say, "Oh well, there's the next Chief Master Sergeant Air Force." There's only one of those, and you know, it gave me purpose. It gave me something to do. My problem is when I'm alone and my thoughts are racing and I can't control them. So I guess, yeah. I mean, even through the mental health illness, I've always still had the drive to succeed and to do, you know, the next thing. And yeah, I mean, now getting my bachelor's degree, you know, that put me in a depression of my own, having to do homework and stuff, but yeah, I mean, it was just something that, because, I mean, even with mental illness, you still have dreams. And, you know, to get my bachelor's degree, I needed it in order to do what I want to do next, which is be a counselor. So I just had to push myself through it, no matter how bad I felt that day, no matter what was going on in my head, you know, and stuff like that. It's hard, but I'm pretty sure Dad is constantly with me and kicking me in the butt, telling me not to quit and to keep doing what I'm doing and press forward, and that's what's been pushing me forward lately. You know, it's just I see something in front of me that is great. Kim and I being able to do this nonprofit, if we can become, you know, a big thing, it's so fulfilling. Don't care about money, don't care about what, as long as we're helping people, as long as we're saving lives, we can take that 20, you know, down to 18 suicides a day by veterans. If we can take it down to 19, if we can save one life, it's all worth it. So that's what drives me.
What is the first thing you do when you receive a phone call from somebody that may need your assistance? Can you walk us through it?
Well, we actually we've had the crisis line for a little bit now, but most of the time we just get messages on Facebook. But I do know, we do know the importance of, more than likely, if someone does call us, we're not going to get a rational person. We're not going to get a person that is, hey, I was thinking about taking my own life. You know, they're going to be yelling at you. They're going to be crying out for help. And the biggest thing is to, obviously know where the call is coming from. And being able to reassure them that someone is there for them. You get to, when you get to that point, you feel like there's no one there for you. No one wants to listen. No one wants to, nobody wants to help me. So the most important thing when you pick up the phone is reassuring them that, hey, we're here for you. What can we do for you? Do you need to talk? Do you need medical help? What is the situation completely? And then going from there.
Most of the time, it's different people contacting us for their family member too.
Yeah, we've had a lot of family members reach out for their sons and cousins or stuff like that. So.
In that situation, you have a little bit more time to kind of assess the situation and get as much information as possible. And then most of the time, we try to meet up with a veteran or a police officer after, we gather some of that information if it's from a family member.
Yes, sir.
With the stigma of mental health illness, how difficult was it for you to come out to friends and family, and did it cost you relationships or solidify relationships at all?
It's never cost me a relationship. Fortunately, unfortunately, my entire family, knows the outcome of a mental illness that gets to that point. It's tough initially, but once I actually did come out and say, hey, I have a mental illness, I have a problem, one of the very first things that I did is, every year in the Air Force you have to have a suicide prevention briefing. And in those briefings, you generally have lieutenants or captains up there, reading off a PowerPoint, watching a small video of an airman going through a relationship problem, who starts to drink, who starts to pop pills, who starts to think about taking his own life. And so I went to my leadership and I was like, hey, our suicide prevention program is horrible. Like, you read off a PowerPoint, airmen are walking through the door to sit in this presentation, and as they're walking in, they're saying, oh man, I'd rather kill myself than sit through this thing. And it used to make me cringe. So I went to my leadership and I said, hey, let's make this a little bit personal. I'd like to get up there and tell the story to our group, which is about a little over 500 people. And I got up there and I told my story, and I was a little nervous because, I mean, these are all the people that I work with. You had, retired colonels and retired chiefs and senior master sergeants, and all these people who have retired came back in as civilian. And you're like, man, how are these people going to react to it? And after I was done, I had several people come up to me and say, that is the best suicide prevention briefing I've ever gone through in my life. Because the military gives you this best, I call it a best worst case scenario, because you can sit there and watch the video and see how everything's tumbling down on these people. Well, with me, I had a mental illness. I was suicidal, but I was at work every day. I was considered one of the best in my career field. I was winning awards. I was put in charge of programs that someone at the E6 level, shouldn't be in charge of. I was doing everything that I needed to do, plus some, the best that I possibly could, but yet I was suicidal. So, yeah, after I did that, I was very scared that I was going to be shunned by people. And I only know of one person, and he was actually our top boss, who I was walking into my desk one day and I heard him saying some stuff about my briefing that ticked me off pretty bad. But everybody else was very open to it and very appreciative of the fact of me getting up and telling my story and making it real, instead of watching someone that they don't know on TV go through a bad situation. And that's the problem, like growing up, I didn't know anything about mental illness. I didn't know anything. I knew that my grandma Lee used to worry a lot. Like, I knew that she had bad anxiety, but as far as, anything other than that, no clue. I had absolutely no clue about it. So, it's very rewarding being able to do this. Even though I'm just starting, got to work on going through my presentation, getting everything the way that I want it. But I wouldn't change this for the world. Like, I'll come back next month and tell my story again. Like, I don't care. And in all reality, when you get to the point where I'm at right now, you don't care what people think. Like, I don't care if someone is talking crap about me behind the door because I have mental illness. You don't care. So if people want to shun me, they can shun me. But I've made some very good relationships doing what I'm doing, and that's more rewarding. So, anybody else have anything for me?
Way back, Justin, way back.
Yes.
I want to know what's the one thing we can do to, not generally, but one thing that we need to do specifically for veterans.
Ooh, man, it's tough. It's a very complex answer, because so many veterans nowadays have PTSD, and a lot of them have traumatic brain injuries and stuff like that. And the bad thing about war, the bad thing about combat is not everybody sees the same things. So, I don't get nightmares. My wife does. I can go to a fireworks show with no problem, and if my wife doesn't know that the fireworks are coming, it triggers her. So it's very complex. I mean, do you know veterans in general that you are looking to help, or?
There's some specifics, but it's a general, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, if each one of us are sitting in a room, and we get someone who comes in and sits down with us, that maybe we don't specifically know them and know their mannerisms, what can we do? Is it just a matter of listening? Is it a matter of our interactions with them?
But the biggest thing with that is never ask them what they saw. Don't ever ask them, have you killed anybody? Did you shoot anybody? Did you do this? Did you do that? Don't ever ask those questions to a veteran. Don't ever ask any war-specific questions. That's the most important thing up front. The second thing is to listen, definitely. And the thing with that is veterans are going to be very, very, very apprehensive to talk to somebody about what they went through that hasn't been in the military, because they're going to automatically assume that they don't know, what they're talking about. But yeah, the most important thing is to find common ground with them and figure out exactly what they need to say, and just listen to them. Even if you don't understand, just be that ear for them. Definitely make sure that you point them in the direct. Our nonprofit. If you're listening to what they're saying and they're struggling a lot, you can point them to us. We have a website, we have our crisis line, we have all that stuff, and we'd be more than willing to help in any way that we possibly can.
What, now if somebody has already completed suicide or dies by suicide, and they do come your way, they do find your website, how do you direct them? The family?
A lot of our stuff right now. Are you talking as far as
It's a family member. If
how
they
to
see
deal
you-
with it?
Yes. Have you had that happen?
We haven't had that happen yet, but I mean, we would definitely, obviously share our experiences. You know what I mean? And the most important thing to find with grieving people, and we talked about this earlier, is all of us kind of went into our own corners and stayed there for many, many years. And then, I mean, in the long run, that just ended up causing more heartache for everybody, instead of everybody coming together as a family and trying to get through the process together. So, I mean, obviously, you guys know that when you do find a family that has lost someone to suicide, they kind of become your family as well. And so finding that common ground and sharing stories and stuff like that, I think is the most important
Do
thing.
you have an agency that you would recommend? Some sort of, you do the prevention part, but afterwards, if they've completed it, is there some place you can send them?
Send the family?
Yeah, something online, look at this site might be good for you, or.
We have a tendency to, it depends on the situation, if it was a veteran, if it was a civilian. Civilians, we have a tendency to send over to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They are one of the biggest, especially in Utah. We have a friend, Teagan, who is the chair for the Utah chapter of American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and she is absolutely amazing. And you know, we use her as a reference a lot, or you know, say, hey, you know, get a hold of her, and sometimes whether they get a hold of her or not, we don't know, but and with Michelle working for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention now too, you know, obviously they're going to be a group that they're so established and doing such great things for suicide prevention that, you know, if we can't handle the situation, then that's who we turn to. Anybody else?
Justin?
I was gonna say, I just have a comment.
Yeah.
It's just really admirable to see you, especially knowing other veterans who haven't sought help even if they've needed it, due to whether they're afraid of losing their job or their gender, you're male, you're not supposed to show weakness. So that's super admirable, and especially to see you and Michelle, who I've been good friends with since I was 10, 11 years old, taking this such a tragic event and shedding light on it in a positive way. And I know Michelle does a lot of stuff for suicide awareness, and so it's really awesome.
Thank you. I mean, she may be my little sister, but I look up to her as well. She has done such amazing things for suicide prevention, and will continue to do so, I have no doubt. And that's kind of the tough thing about being an advocate for suicide prevention, is the fact that, you know, we had to lose our dad in order for us to help other people. But now we have, you know, the opportunity to save as many lives as we possibly can. And yeah, my little sister is definitely one of my heroes. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
You stated earlier that you weren't able to go through with your suicide because of your wife and your mom and your sister, and other family members. But you never mentioned yourself. Is it difficult to have self-worth with the thoughts going through your mind?
Very much.
And have you gotten to that stage yet, or still working?
Yeah, I had gotten to a point of where I looked in the mirror and I saw nothing. I absolutely hated myself. I mean, I've even gotten to a point of when I have gotten suicidal, where Kim's like, you had absolutely nothing behind your eyes. Like no one was there. Like you were going, you know, insane, but no one was there. And yeah, it's hard to gain that self-worth back. You gotta, for me, a big thing is feeling accomplished and doing something that I feel is contributing to society and helping people. And so, you know, when I got to the point of where I absolutely hated myself, I felt like I wasn't contributing to my mission in the Air Force. I didn't feel like I was contributing to anything. I thought I was a burden. And I stopped lifting, gained a ton of weight, and over the past 4 or 5 months, actually it's been a little bit longer than that, but I'm finally starting to get back the self-worth again, and lifting again, you know, going to the gym and doing stuff that I love. The thing with mental illness, you know, is when you hate yourself, you know, you hate everybody else too. So when you hate everybody else, you don't want to be around anybody. So you end up at the house doing nothing, eating, watching TV, and just not taking care of yourself. Yeah, it's definitely slowly coming back. I'm definitely a much better. I can look in the mirror and like the person that I am, as opposed to when I was suicidal and didn't even recognize the person that I saw in the mirror.
Rumor has it you broke a new personal best this last week?
I did. I did break a personal best. I
What was that?
deadlifted 565. So, yeah, in the gym hard again. That's definitely important for your mental health too. Is finding what you love and doing it. And mine is weightlifting. So that's definitely contributed in more than one way to bettering my mental health. Anybody else? All right, I'm sure I'm pretty close to the hour, aren't I? Am I over? Oh, wow, sorry. Okay. All right. If you guys can stop at our table at the end, start coming back.